A dying man's last whisper, a cassette tape hidden for 30 years, and the confessions of the last hitman who worked directly for Pablo Escobar. This is not a movie. This is the true story of a ghost named El Mico. Medellín, 1989. The city was bleeding. Every night, gunfire echoed off the mountains like thunder that never stopped. A 16-year-old boy named Javier, known as El Mico for his thin, monkey-like arms, ran errands for a small-time dealer. He wasn't a killer yet. He was just hungry. One evening, a black Mercedes pulled up beside him. The window rolled down. The man inside didn't introduce himself. He just said, "You want to eat real food? Get in." 3 days later, El Mico held a revolver for the first time. The target was a rival sicario, a man who had killed 2 of Pablo's collectors. They drove him to an empty lot near the airport. "Do it or we do you," said the handler. El Mico's hands shook so badly he dropped the gun once. The second time, he fired 3 times. The man fell forward. From a car 50 meters away, Pablo Escobar watched through binoculars. He nodded once. El Mico became someone else that night. Training was not a camp. It was a prison called La Catedral, built by Pablo himself. Inside, El Mico learned how to break fingers without snapping bone, how to make a man confess with a plastic bag, and how to bury a body in 30 minutes. Other teenagers laughed at first. Then they stopped laughing when one of them disobeyed and was found hanging from a basketball hoop. El Mico never smiled again. He became Pablo's shadow. Wherever the boss went, the thin monkey followed. The code was simple. No names, no photos, no diaries. Your family does not know what you do. Your friends are not your friends. Emotion was a bullet waiting to go off. El Mico watched a fellow hitman cry after a job. The next morning, that hitman was found with his throat cut. Pablo stood over the body and said, "Tears are for widows." From that day, El Mico trained himself to feel nothing. When his own mother asked what he did for work, he said, "Delivery." She never asked again. After the Avianca Flight bombing in November 1989 to 107 innocent people killed, Pablo's paranoia exploded. He suspected everyone, even his oldest lieutenants. El Mico was ordered to follow them, to listen through walls, to report every whisper. One night, he overheard 2 men joking about Pablo's weight. They were dead by sunrise. El Mico realized loyalty meant nothing. Only fear kept you alive. And Pablo's fear was now a disease. He started seeing traitors in mirrors. Chino was El Mico's only real friend. They had grown up in the same gutter, stolen the same bread. Chino was funny, careless, loved to talk. Too much. One night, Chino told a girl at a bar that Pablo was hiding in a specific neighborhood. The girl's cousin worked for the DEA. 3 days later, Pablo handed El Mico a photograph of Chino. "He leaks, you lose," Pablo said. Then he placed a gun on the table. El Mico's hand did not shake this time. He drove Chino to a quarry outside the city. Chino begged. He cried. He said they were brothers. El Mico shot him twice in the back of the head. Then he knelt down and took the gold chain from Chino's neck, a small crucifix on a thin link. He put it around his own neck, under his shirt. "For you, hermano," he whispered. That chain would never come off. Even 30 years later, he could feel Chino's weight pressing against his heart every single night. By 1992, a new enemy rose. Los Pepes, a people persecuted by Pablo Escobar. They were vigilantes funded by the Cali cartel and the CIA. Their mission was simple: kill every single one of Pablo's men, not just Pablo. El Mico watched his colleagues die one by one. One was shot in a barber's chair. Another was blown up inside his car. Paranoia became a living thing. El Mico stopped sleeping in the same place twice. He became a ghost among ghosts. The bomb that almost killed him was hidden in a motorcycle parked outside his girlfriend's apartment. He was walking toward the door when he noticed the kickstand was wet fresh oil. He turned and ran. The explosion threw him 20 feet. 4 of his crew, waiting inside the apartment, were shredded. El Mico lost hearing in his left ear forever. He crawled through broken glass, bleeding from his scalp, and thought. Someone inside told them. That day, he trusted no one. The last time El Mico saw Pablo alive was on a rooftop in Medellín, mid-1993. Pablo looked thin, tired, his famous belly gone. He had a satellite phone in one hand and a revolver in the other. They are closing in, Pablo said. But I have a plan. He handed El Mico a sealed brown envelope. Do not open this until you hear I am dead. Inside is money and names. Use them to survive, or use them to avenge me. I don't care which. Then he disappeared down a fire escape. El Mico hid the envelope inside a hollowed-out Bible. For months, he carried it everywhere. He heard rumors. Pablo hiding in garages, Pablo dying of fever, Pablo begging his son for help. El Mico did not open the envelope. He was terrified of what was inside, because he knew if it contained a kill list, he would have to follow it, and he was so tired of killing. So he waited. He prayed to a God he didn't believe in, and then the radio spoke. December 2nd, 1993. El Mico was in a cheap hotel room eating stale bread when the news broke. Pablo Escobar has been killed in a rooftop shootout with search block. The announcer's voice was shaking. El Mico sat completely still. He waited for a feeling of relief, sadness, freedom. Nothing came. He finished the bread, then took out the envelope. His hands did not shake. He tore it open. Inside, a hand-drawn map and a list of 7 names. 4 of them were still alive. The map led to a farmhouse outside La Sella. Pablo had buried $5 million in a steel drum under a pigsty. The names on the list were the men who had sold Pablo's location to the Colombian National Police. El Mico had 2 choices: take the money and disappear, or hunt the traitors. He decided to do both. But first he needed to get to the farmhouse. He stole a horse and rode through the night, the gold chain bouncing against his chest. The farmhouse was guarded by a man named Sombra, a former hitman who had also worked for Pablo. Sombra had not received the envelope. He thought the money was his. When El Mico walked into the barn, Sombra raised a shotgun. Pablo is dead, Sombra said. This is mine now. El Mico did not raise his gun. He just stared. Pablo gave it to me, he said. Step aside, or I will bury you next to the pigs. Sombra laughed. Then he fired. The shotgun blast hit a wooden beam. El Mico rolled under it, drew his pistol, and fired twice into Sombra's knee. The man screamed and fell. El Mico walked over, put the barrel against his forehead. Where is the drum? Sombra pointed to the pigsty. El Mico did not kill him. He left him there, bleeding, and dug up the steel drum himself. Inside, bundles of cash, a few gold coins, and a photograph of Pablo as a young man, smiling. He took only half the cash, $2.5 million. The rest he reburied. He was not being noble. He was being smart. Too much money attracts attention. Too little leaves you weak. Then he walked back to Sombra, who was now pale from blood loss. Tell them I died here, El Mico said. He fired 1 shot into the ground beside Sombra's head, then left. Sombra would live. And he would tell everyone that El Mico had been killed in a gunfight. The lie spread. To complete the fake death, El Mico needed a body. He found a homeless man who had frozen to death on a bench. He placed his own ID in the man's pocket, burned the face beyond recognition, and left the body near the farmhouse. Then he bought false papers from a corrupt clerk. His new name, Carlos Magea. Occupation, carpenter. He cut his hair, grew a beard, and moved to a village called Jardin where nobody asked questions. For 20 years, El Mico built tables and chairs. He spoke to no one about the past. He attended Mass every Sunday because it made him invisible. He watched his hands turn calloused from wood, not from guns. Sometimes at night he dreamed of Chino. Sometimes he woke up screaming, but he never cried. Pablo had been right about one thing. Tears were for widows. And El Mico had widowed himself from the world, until the filmmaker came. Her name was Ana. She was making a documentary about the children of Escobar's victims. By accident, she found an old police report mentioning El Mico as still possibly alive. She spent 3 years tracking him. She found him in Jardin, buying vegetables at a market. She sat next to him on a bench and said, I know who you are. I don't want to expose you. I want to hear the truth before you die. He looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded. The agreement was strict. No camera, no face, no real names. Only a cassette recorder. El Mico spoke for 6 hours over 3 nights. His voice was soft, almost gentle. He described killings the way a mechanic describes fixing an engine. Ana cried 3 times. El Mico did not. He only paused when he talked about Chino. That chain, he said, touching his collar. I have never taken it off. Not for a single shower. Not for a single night. First confession. The Avianca bomb was not meant to blow up mid-flight. It was supposed to detonate on the ground, as a warning to a politician who had boarded the plane. But the timer was faulty. Pablo cried when he heard the death toll, Mico said. Not for the people, for the bad press. He paused. I saw the list of passengers afterward. There were 43 children. I helped load the bomb into the suitcase. That is the first thing I will answer for when I die. Second confession. Pablo did not die alone. Mico claims that a final order was delivered by a messenger hours before the rooftop shootout. The order came from Pablo himself. If they find me, do not let them take me alive. Mico was not on the roof, but he had trained one of the men who was. He put a bullet in Pablo's head before the police could grab him, Mico said. It was a mercy kill, or an execution. I still do not know where. Third confession. The location of a missing politician, Luis Carlos Galan's campaign manager, who vanished in 1990. Mico drew a map. The body was buried under a concrete slab at a construction site that was never finished. He was not a bad man, Mico said. He was just in the way. I held the flashlight while someone else did the digging. Ana asked why confess now. Mico lifted his shirt. His liver was swollen, his skin yellow. Cancer, he said. 3 months. He pulled the gold chain from under his shirt. The tiny crucifix was worn smooth from decades of touch. I told myself I kept this to remember Chino, he said. But that is a lie. I kept it because I wanted to be punished. Every night, that chain feels like a noose. I have not slept a full night since 1989. This is my hell. Not fire, not demons. Just the memory of a friend's face right before I pulled the trigger. Ana turned off the recorder. She asked one final question. If you could go back, would you get in that black Mercedes? Mico took a long time to answer. The sun was setting over the mountains. No, he said finally. I would have stayed hungry. Hunger ends. But what I did, that never ends. He stood up, walked to his workshop, and began sanding a wooden chair. His hands were steady. Ana left without saying goodbye. She knew she would never see him alive again. 3 weeks later, Mico returned to Medellín. He wore a hat and sunglasses. He stood outside the ruined Monaco building where Pablo once lived. Children now played soccer in the shadow of its bullet-scarred walls. An old woman sold arapes from a cart. Mico bought one. He ate it slowly. Then he walked to the corner where Chino was shot. The building was gone. A pharmacy stood in its place. He knelt on the sidewalk. He placed a single red rose on the pavement. People stepped around him, assuming he was a beggar. He stayed there for 10 minutes. Then he whispered, Perdonami, Chino. Perdonami. He stood up, wiped his eyes, and realized he was crying. For the first time in 30 years, tears ran down his face. Pablo's voice echoed in his head. Tears are for widows. Mico laughed bitterly. Then I am a widow, he said. I have been one since I was 16. His final night alive, he recorded a message for his Suna boy he had never met. The son was now a priest in a small town called Manizales. Mico had watched him from afar, never speaking. On the tape, he said, I am not your father. I am a monster who happened to donate sperm. But I want you to know, the money I sent to your mother every month was not from carpentry. It was blood money. Burn this tape after you listen. Do not forgive me. Forgive yourself for never knowing me. Mico died alone in his workshop, surrounded by wooden chairs. The gold chain was still around his neck. Ana found his body 3 days later. She sent the tape to his son, the priest. The son listened to it once. He did not burn it. He locked it in a drawer. Then he drove to Jardin, stood over the unmarked grave, and said a prayer. Rest in peace, Javier, he said. He did not say father. He could not. But he left a single white flower on the dirt. The tape was never released to the public, but Ana kept a copy. She plays it sometimes, late at night, when she cannot sleep. Mico's last words on that tape were, The real devil is not Pablo. It is the silence we keep for 30 years. I broke my silence. Now it is your turn. Tell someone the truth before you die, because the dead do not confess. The living must. Then a click, then nothing. And somewhere in Medellín, a gold chain still waits under the earth, holding a sinner's prayer.